Hi there everyone, Lars here with a very long overdue Owl House review brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and it's high time that I've reviewed the episode thanks to them. Wow, I cannot believe that I've put this off for so long, but there is a reason for it. Number one, I actually saw this episode right as I was about to go out to Scotland for a little while, so there was no time to put together a good review. While I was in Scotland, I spent a lot of time with my sister. Both she and I are big fans of the Owl House. We talked a lot of things over and began to realize that I had much deeper thoughts regarding the Owl House. Came back home, looked at it again, and there's just some things I wasn't exactly sure how I should say them. How could I put into words some of the feelings that this episode gave me and the insights that I got? So let me just say right off the bat, I love this episode, and there's so much about it that's so good. But there's that fly in the ointment that prevented this episode from becoming truly a masterpiece. And on top of that, retroactively made so much of the show kind of unenjoyable for me. So I'm going to get to all of that here in this review. First off, just a very quick breakdown of this episode. Most people have already seen it. Most people have already discussed it. So real quick, the story about this is Luz and all her friends have found themselves cut off in the human world. The Collector has shut them out from the Boiling Isles. There's no way for them to get back, and so they spend the rest of the summer and well into the Halloween season, into the fall, trying to figure out how to get back to the Boiling Isles. Luz takes her place once again, going to school, and she's going through a lot of rough stuff. She's going through a lot of guilt, a lot of anxiety regarding what happened with the Collector and how on earth she's going to get her friends back home and what's happening with King and Ida and everyone else. Woof, she's got a lot that she's laboring under. Everyone else, of course, has a lot to deal with as well, but they're actually taking it pretty well in stride. The witches actually find themselves acclimating really well to the human world, and I love how Vi and Camilla are there to kind of help everyone along. They are absolutely the MVPs of this entire story. Well, the teenage witches, what they discover, thanks to Flapjack, is hidden in the floorboards of the old house where Luz went into the Boiling Isles. There is a rebus, this special coded map that will help them to discover some Titan's blood that's been buried somewhere within Gravesfield. So they go on this quest to discover where it is, and this leads then to Amity saying, hey, you know what, let's surprise Luz with discovering the Titan's blood on Halloween night. It's going to be amazing. Luz, meanwhile, is planning on letting everyone know that she's going to stay in the human world because she feels like that's going to be the best thing for everyone because she doesn't want to continue to screw stuff up. And meanwhile, Hunter has been repossessed, or has been possessed truly, by Belos. And this leads to a fantastic confrontation on this little island in an abandoned graveyard. And boom, we get the revelations. We get the awesome cliffhanger. Wow, it was great. And just to kind of run down a lot of the things that I really enjoyed about this episode. Number one, Camilla is the best mom. I love when a story shows a healthy relationship within a family. Weirdly enough, because we don't see it portrayed so often in fantasy or in fiction or in television, it's actually kind of difficult to write these kinds of stories, to write these kinds of characters, because people just now expect broken, horrible families. That is stupid, especially because there's so many people for whom that's not the case. And it's amazing to see Camilla really take charge. She is a hero throughout this entire story. She is so accepting of her daughter. She's so accepting of all of these crazy kids. And as she says, she never expected to be the mother of 6, and yet she does it. And she does it fantastically well. And Camilla's dealing with so many of her own problems, but she shoulders them and she tries to work through them. And that is fantastic. I love it. And she just brings so much positivity to this entire episode. And really every scene that she's in, Camilla's character elevates the entire series. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of season 3 and seeing more of what Camilla does as she interacts with the other characters and just brings that goodness to the rest of the story. Another thing that I've joked about in the past, but now I can honestly say it, Hunter is now the main character of the story. This episode gave us so much about Hunter. Hunter goes on a truly fantastic hero's journey to really become someone new. This is something that he lost. He lost his identity as the Golden Guard, as Hunter, by the end of season 2. He had gone on this fantastic redemption arc, and yet that redemption arc leads to him losing something very precious. In this episode, he goes on the full hero's journey to gain what he's lost, and that is an identity. He is now a new son. He is a new friend. He is a new soul all together, and he is going now back to the Boiling Isles. He is returning with that new knowledge, with that new soul, with that new identity, and he is going to be one of the main characters to help save the day. Hallelujah! There's a good reason why Dana said that Caleb is one of her favorite characters, and it absolutely shows. They poured so much love and attention into Caleb's character into this episode. Caleb, Hunter, they're basically now the same character to me. Hunter, Caleb the Hunter, whatever. Hunter is an absolutely fantastic character. This episode just completely solidifies it. Other things that I loved about Hunter is how Hunter deals with the possession. I loved actually getting to see that. It gets better each time you watch it. And I love that Hunter is the one who then just goes after Bellows and basically tries to destroy Bellows alongside with himself. Oh, it's so good. And Hunter geeking out with Gus, that is just everything. I love how these two nerds have become such great friends and how they just bonded over so many things, from wolves to the final frontier. Oh, it's so good. Or whatever it is, the knockoff of Star Trek, but it's so freaking good. And another thing I love is V. V is a fantastic character. I love that V is a pro about Earth, and that this basilisk, who never felt like she fit in somewhere, now has some place where she absolutely belongs, and she owns it. She is the character who basically guides everyone along. If you don't have V in this episode, everything falls apart for the witches, because she's honestly their bedrock, and she's just such a fun, cute character. I love seeing her on screen. They once again just poured so much heart and soul into this character. It was great. The Halloween backdrop was pretty fun. It's kind of interesting because at first I was like, ooh, this is a great Halloween story. But in truthfulness, really, Halloween is just a backdrop within this particular episode of The Owl House. This episode feels like a Halloween story. It was released at the proper time with the right ambiance. It definitely fits a Halloweenish story, though it's kind of hard for me to really say that it is a Halloween story. It doesn't really tap so much into the spirit of Halloween, though it does touch on a lot of Halloween elements, the spookiness, the monster that's stalking everyone, how the familiar becomes what's dangerous, and that this Massachusetts town has that dark, creepy history that becomes very relevant and very important. So it has a lot of Halloween elements in it, but I'm not exactly sure if this is truly a Halloween story. Still a great Halloween backdrop. Very, very well animated. And on the topic of backstories, I love that we get this hilarious little explanation for Philip and Caleb, and I really do think that, even though it was something that we already could have speculated on and the fans basically had guessed the story ahead of time, it's nice to get that confirmation that the fans were correct, and it's very well delivered. Another thing that really was amazing about this episode is its handling of the family, showing once again that family is very important. This is something that's been touched on throughout the series, but here we absolutely see it, and it really comes in full force because Camilla creates such a healthy family environment. And so now that we get to see that in action for all of these characters who are cut off from their own families or who need to discover a family like Hunter, it just works so well. It's so uplifting, and it really makes you feel like you're at home with these characters, more so than really any other episode in the entire show. The importance of family is just wow. It's so well done. When you have a story that can really nail the family dynamic even for a collection of characters, it works out so well. This is something that the Fast and the Furious series always tries to do. It's all about family. But to be all honest, I've never been sold on Dom Toretto's family. But this one episode alone absolutely sold me on the family dynamic that Camilla has with all of these teens. Moving on to something a little bit more lighthearted, meeting the giraffes, perfect. That summed up everything that was teased out at the beginning of the first season. And I love how Gus is like, I am going to reestablish relations with the giraffes. And afterwards he's like, yeah, no thanks. I understand why our ancestors banished those freaks. I love the puzzle of the rebus. It works out really, really well. I think it would have been a whole lot more fun if we had gotten a little bit more. I said before this episode that it would be neat to kind of have like a Scooby-Doo element to this episode. The rebus actually kind of gives us some of that, and I just wish that we'd gotten more because it was cool. It was interesting. I would have loved to have seen that scavenger hunt throughout town and maybe reveal a little bit more about the history of the witch hunters through this treasure hunt. And I mean, one of the things that could have been discovered is like, okay, who's left the Titan blood there? I mean, we're probably going to get an answer to that later, but it would be interesting to know, like, what kinds of things were these witch hunters doing? Was this actually a common occurrence, or was this vial maybe something that was placed there as kind of a last resort by the witch hunters, by the witches, should they ever get lost? Who really knows? And I don't know if we'll actually ever really get the full answer there, which is again why it would have been neat to get a little bit more of that history through the puzzle solving of the rebus. Now then, last couple things to talk about. Great montages in this episode. They were an absolute delight. You got some great character development happening there in the background. The music was well put in. The animation was on point. Oh my gosh, montages for this episode were fantastic. And finally, that last battle. It wasn't anything as big and grandiose as some of the other battles that we've seen thus far in the series, but it was a battle that really meant something because we actually got to see the stakes again involved with Bellows killing Flapjack to show that this guy is indeed truly a villain, and if you're not careful, he's not going to act like your regular Saturday morning cartoon villain who's just going to be like, you can't defeat me. No, Bellows will go in for the kill, and the only reason why he hasn't really murdered anyone else yet out of this party is that he's still toying with them. He still sees some value in characters like Luz, which will be interesting to see how he continues to manipulate them and pull the strings, because that is what he's doing this entire time. He manhandles them in this fight, which it's kind of interesting because they took him out so easily in the previous fight, but this time now he really has the upper hand, and that might be because of his because he's possessing Hunter. So a lot of really interesting stuff happening here in this episode. A lot of stuff that I really enjoyed. The action, the animation, the music, the character progression, all of it. Mwah! Chef's kiss! However, by now, you might be realizing something. There's one character who I've not really talked about. Yes, I haven't really touched so much on Willow and Amity. I really do wish that we'd gotten more of their characters in this episode. But the one character who I really haven't talked about being awesome or doing really anything because she is the main character is Luz. And this is why it took me so long to do this review for this episode, even though I honestly have tried multiple times, and it's because despite how much I love this show, I felt like I had a dagger shoved into my gut and then shoved into my heart while watching this each time, because Luz has become the official punching bag of the Owl House. Dana Terrace and her crew actually used the meme as their writing guide of, it's good to torture your characters. No, it is not. And I will die on this hill. You should challenge your characters. You need to give them moments to grow, and that might actually mean that you put them into literal torture situations. You want to make sure that there is a goal for them to achieve. There's a villain for them to go up against. There's some sort of antagonistic force. There's a weakness that they must overcome. Something. And that makes sense because you want your character to progress in meaningful ways. But that is not in and of itself torture. That is life. And what we want to see in our stories is we want to see characters becoming better, becoming their best selves by overcoming challenges. It's always very boring when you see a story where a character doesn't have any flaws or really any sort of big flaws in order that they have to overcome, or where the villains are very easily defeated. That gets boring really quickly. However, something that gets really tricky and messed up is when you decide to torture your character repeatedly. Now then, As some people begin to say, but wait, Luz has gone through a whole lot here. She should feel guilty about what happened with Bellows. Of course she's worried about Ida and about King. Of course she's worried about betraying her mother's trust and going back to the Boiling Isles. Luz is suffering under a whole lot, and you know what? I get that. I really do, and I think that can be played up to be really good character progression. Here is, though, the problem. Luz should not be feeling this much guilt. In fact, because this stuff has already been discussed multiple times throughout Season 2, that Luz is not responsible for the evil actions of other characters, especially Bellows. How many times has this been put into her head? And yet, she has not overcome this issue. In fact, each time it comes up, she just drops deeper into depression and guilt and anxiety. And while we might say that that's realistic for some people, here's the problem. When you punch a character down that much, that deep into the earth, it requires that much effort to pull them up out of it. To give you a quick good example right here, within the Stormlight Archive series, the character Kaladin suffers with crippling depression, and even though he rises to amazing heroic heights, his depression continuously pulls him down book after book after book. And the fourth book is beautiful because of its chapter, The Dog and the Dragon, or The Dragon and the Dog, I should say, because it addresses this matter of depression and then says, you're going to be dealing with it for a very long time. And you know what? In fact, Kaladin, you are going to have to put in a whole ton of effort to fight against this inner demon, this inner monster of yours. But you know what? It will be worth it, because you will feel the light again, you will feel warm again, and your friends and your family will be there for you. Believe it. It's a beautiful message, and it's a message that still takes Kaladin a lot of time to accept. It's a very long journey for him to become the hero that we want him to be, that we know he can be. So it requires a lot of work. He has to overcome a lot of problems. We know that Luz can be this great, amazing witch. We see the potential in her. But she has a lot of problems that she has to overcome. And I support that. I really do. But these problems have continuously hit her again and again and again. Let's think about what this episode has introduced us to. These problems that have not been resolved. She still needs to talk it over with her mother about what's happening with her guilt regarding the Boiling Isles. This issue has been kicked down the road multiple times. It still hasn't been addressed. Also, it's been hit home really hard this episode that she's dealing with the grief of the loss of her father, which has not been addressed. She also has betrayed Amity, which Amity frankly forgives, which is cool and everything of her, but Luz still needs to forgive herself and get over these issues. Luz has been hiding stuff from her friends. This is a reoccurring problem which she still hasn't overcome. She has not overcome her grief about what has happened with Bellows. She has not overcome her guilt regarding the Collector. She has not overcome her anxiety regarding what has happened, and there are still the problems of defeating Bellows and defeating the Collector and resolving all of the interdimensional issues that she has. You can solve all of those problems. You can help Luz become the Great Witch, and this hasn't even come yet to the issues of her talisman or all this other stuff. The fact of the matter is that there's all these different problems. Those problems must be resolved, especially because the show has made such a big deal about them. But the show only has an hour and 20 minutes left to address all of these issues. And that's a big problem, because some of that stuff is really deep, really difficult, and the show still needs to give time to all of its other characters and the arcs that need to be addressed. If it doesn't do that, you'll have all of these loose threads, which will then cause the entire story to collapse under its own narrative weight. By making Luz the punching bag, by torturing her again and again and again and again and again, rewinding all of her progress across seasons 1 and 2, as a result, you cannot resolve all the issues that you need to resolve with Luz and resolve all the issues that the story has overall. I guess you could, but it would require you to basically fast forward through so much development that needs to be had that it will cheapen the experience. So effectively, Dana and her crew have written themselves into a corner where Luz is concerned. They have degraded Luz so horribly that honestly, I don't care about her being the main character anymore. I think that Hunter's the main character now, and I'm watching the show more for him and for King, because those are the characters I've come to love, and those are the characters who have actually progressed throughout this story. You have 2 episodes left, 2 specials to help Luz achieve the same heights as King and Hunter. It can be done, but it will be done to the detriment of the rest of the story. I have faith that the Owl House will end well, but I don't know if I have faith that they can actually tie off all of these loose threads, all these loose ends with Luz, and help her to become the hero that she needs to be, that we know that she can be. And that's crushing for me as a fan because I fell in love with the series in large part at the beginning because of Luz. Luz and King were the characters who drew me into the Owl House. And now one of those 2 characters is just a punching bag. Whew, I know that's getting a little bit spicy right there. So let's step back a little bit and let's think about this as authors. What can we do about the situation? Well, you need to challenge your characters. That's what makes them interesting because they have vices, they have strengths, they have weaknesses, they have blessings, they have friends, they have weird quirks, they've got their dynamics, all of that stuff. There's so much that goes into making a good character that when you think about all of these different elements that come to make a multifaceted individual, from their likes, their dislikes, their strengths, their weaknesses, their backstories, their interests, their possible romances, their friendships, their family dynamic, what kind of education do they have, goals do they aspire to, all of these things. When you take into account all of these things, interestingly enough, it becomes harder to actually torture your characters. I mean, you definitely can, and we always joke about it, that it's like, haha, we're torturing them because we know that we love them and we know what's best for them. But really, I think we need to change the meme and we need to say, no, we're going to challenge our characters, because once you've made your character so deep and so multifaceted, you begin to realize that spending your time, quote-unquote, torturing them, putting them through all of these trials, all this muck, and just obliterating them with their weaknesses, you're actually taking away from all of the other great things that you have put into this character, and you just make them a sad punching bag. No, we don't want that. What we want to do is this: when you build your character and you make the specific weaknesses and the strengths that they have, think about, okay, how can we turn those weaknesses into strengths, and how can those strengths be challenged? So you come up with different sort of obstacles and characters who will challenge them, make them realize, you know what, I wasn't as good as I thought I was, or this is indeed a weakness and this is embarrassing. But if I wish to progress in my life, whether it be on my quest or in this relationship or in my job, what have you, I have to tackle this stuff head on. And they will do so. And they might fail, and that's totally fine if you write that. That's absolutely fine. Failure is actually sometimes really, really good for a character. But you need to show them progressing. You need to show them growing. Luz as a character has stepped backwards quite some ways, has stagnated in others, and honestly, when I was watching this episode for the most recent time, I kept on doing a running commentary of, wait a second, that's already been addressed. Wait a second, Luz has already learned this. Wait a second, Luz knows that that's not a problem. Why is it then that they made Luz such a tortured character? It's because there's this weird, twisted belief that the more that we torture characters, the more people come to love them, the more people come to identify with them. That's not the case, actually. If you torture a character too much, it becomes hard to identify with that character, and you just kind of feel sad, and what you just want is you want a happy ending for them, because you're just like, well, I've suffered with you thus far. Can you please have a happy ending? And what's sad is that many times they're given their happy ending, and it actually doesn't resolve the issues. This is one of the reasons why I like the story of Berserk, because while Berserk goes into horrifying depths of depression and awfulness, each and every time that Guts picks himself back up, he gets stronger. He learns something new. He's able to embrace another element of his life, of his weaknesses, grow stronger. He gains new friends, he gains new allies, and he pushes on ahead. And if you're caught up with the Berserk manga, you'll know that right now Guts is at his absolute lowest. And it gets me so excited because I know that I have seen Guts pick himself up again and again and again, that I am so excited to see how Guts overcomes the ultimate defeat that he has just gone through. When I look at what's happened with Luz has just been a growing ball of anxiety and depression. She has barely been given any real wins that have allowed her to address these issues. As a result, you have this big messy ball of all these problems and torture that need to be untangled and resolved, and you don't have the time. So my advice in short is this: challenge your characters, which sometimes means that you will torture them, but don't take it to heart that you should be like, I torture my characters because I love them. I torture my characters because it's great. Everyone loves tortured characters. No, not really. It's actually a bad way of thinking about it. I've seen way too many stories where the stories and the characters have been sunk in the absolute torture and abominations that have been done to these poor characters. And then when they're given their happy ending, you just feel a catharsis because it's over, but really there's been no proper resolution. Challenging your character means that they discover solutions. They grow through their trials, they grow through their pain and become better, and thereby progress the plot. Torturing your characters alone does not provide you with the opportunities to do that, and as a result, both character and story suffer. So those are my insights from this most recent episode. Thanks to them. Hopefully when the newest episode comes out, I will be way more prompt with my review because it definitely deserves it. And I do want to get back into looking at the Owl House because it is so much fun. But I'm worried about what's going to happen with Luz. I'm worried about what's going to happen with Luz. I do have my doubts about how her character arc is going to be resolved. So let's buckle up for the ride. Let's see where things go. And if you're looking for more writing advice, please check out our other videos here on our YouTube channel. You can also head on over to our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have writing exercises for you to check out over at our Pinterest page. And of course, we would love for you to join our growing community of novice authors. Like, subscribe, comment to this video. Please share it on out. And especially if you would like to support us, please check out the books that we've published. They are in the description below. Thank you for joining us on this witchy adventure that we call writing. And until the next episode of the Owl House, y'all, juice.